Hello guys, welcome to part 2 of True SMC from A to Z 2026 edition Market Structure Mapping. And so without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, so before I start, make sure that you know how to identify valid pullbacks. Otherwise, you may consider watching the previous part, valid pullback identification, before we proceed with this one. Okay, so in true SMC, a bullish break of structure occurs after price takes out the most recently formed valid pullback low. The keyword here is recently. So if we get into this chart, we can clearly see that this one here is a valid pullback. So this here is the valid pullback low. Again, we can clearly see another valid pullback, and this one here is the valid pullback low. And then coming up, we can clearly see that this one here is not a valid pullback. So this means that the valid pullback low is this one here. And we can clearly see that this here is the recent valid pullback that price took. And in this case, it was by a body. We can clearly see right here, we say that by either a wick or a body. So this takeout of the recently formed valid pullback low, it can either be low. It can either be by a wick or body. And you can clearly see in this case, it was by a body. Okay, so then price reverses and breaks above the swing point high that existed prior to the retracement. So you can clearly see on this chart that after price has taken out the recently formed valid pullback low, price continued lower, took another low, but eventually, as you can clearly see, it reversed back and broke past this swing point high that existed prior to the retracement. So the lowest point reached during the retracement becomes the new swing point low. And we can clearly see exactly right here that this one here is the swing point that price achieved during the retracement before reversing back and breaking past this swing point high. And this is what we call a bullish break of structure. After price takes out the most recently formed valid pullback low, it doesn't matter how further price continues taking more pullback lows, we are only interested with the recently one, and that's the reason as to why I was emphasizing here that the keyword was the most recently. And then after that, once price reverses and breaks above this high, then that's what we call a bullish break of structure. So now that we have covered a bullish scenario, let's get to the bearish scenario. Alright, so in a bearish scenario, a bearish break of structure occurs after price takes out the most recently formed valid pullback high. You can clearly see that in this case, it's the high because we are in a bearish scenario. And you can clearly see exactly right here that this one here was the most recently formed valid pullback that price took its high exactly right there, and you can clearly see it reversed and made a break past this swing point low prior to the retracement, and this is what we call that break of structure, that bearish break of structure. So the takeout can either be by a wick or a body. You can clearly see this case, it was by a body, and then price reverses. That is, after price has taken out this, it doesn't matter how further price continues higher, taking more pullback highs, we are only interested with the recent one. So after price has taken out the most recent pullback high and then reverses back and breaks past this swing point low, then this is what we call a bearish break of structure. Exactly right here, you can clearly see price reverses, breaks above the swing point low that existed prior to the retracement. The highest point reached during the retracement becomes the new swing point high, and we can clearly see that this one here is the highest point reached during this retracement, and that becomes the swing point high. So guys, that we have covered how to identify a bearish break of structure as well as a bullish break of structure. Now let's get things practical and start marking the market structure. Alright, so just like we identified earlier, we can clearly see that price has taken out the recently formed valid pullback low. I will use this mark for that. You'll get to understand why on the next part, so don't worry. And then we can clearly see that price reversed back and made a break past this swing point high prior to this retracement, and that's what we called a valid bullish break of structure. So this means that we have our swing points. So exactly right here, we have got this swing point, and we say that the lowest point price achieved during that retracement is what we call the swing point low. Okay, so now the next step is usually marking the recently formed valid pullback. and we can clearly see exactly right here that this one here is not a valid pullback. And so this means that our recently formed valid pullback low will be this one here and not this one here. Okay, now so I'll continue running price so that we get to see what price unfolds. So exactly right there, we can clearly see that price took out the recently formed valid pullback low exactly right here. So price has taken out the recently formed valid pullback low. So this means that we have just confirmed a swing point exactly right there. And so now if price reverses and makes a break past this swing point high, that will be a break of structure, a bullish break of structure. So let me now continue running price. Okay, so you can clearly see price is heading deeper, but then now you can clearly see price, yeah, exactly right there. You can clearly see that price made a break past that high. So what does this mean? This means that price has just made another bullish break of structure. So exactly right there, that's a break of structure. And the lowest point that price achieved during the retracement is exactly this, and that's the swing point low. So we can clearly see, if I am to measure this depth of this retracement, we can clearly see that price made a 50% retracement, and that's deep enough to confirm this one here as a valid break of structure. So now we are in a new trading range exactly right there. We can clearly see the swing point low. This one here is the swing point low all the way to that high currently, but this is not yet a confirmed swing point. Why? Because price has yet taken out the recently formed valid pullback low. And so if I am to mark the recently formed valid pullback low, we can clearly see where it is exactly right here before the break of structure. So that's where the recently formed valid pullback low is. So let me continue running price. And exactly right here, we can clearly see that price made another valid pullback. So this means that our recently formed valid pullback low is none other than that one there. And you can clearly see price has already retraced and took that out. And you can clearly see the takeout is by a body. Okay, so this means that we have just confirmed a swing point. And so now we'll just be waiting for price to reverse back and break past that swing point high to confirm that bullish break of structure, as long as this swing point low is protected. Okay, so now I'll continue running price. And exactly right there, we can clearly see the break. Exactly right here, that price made a break past this swing point high. And if I am to measure the length of this retracement, we can clearly see that this retracement is barely the 50% of this trading range. And so this means that this retracement is not deep enough to confirm this one here is a valid break of structure. And so in this case, we usually do this low that retracement achieved becomes our new recently formed valid pullback low. So what does this mean? This means that this one here shifts to this one here. So this one here becomes the recently formed valid. So this one here becomes the new recently formed valid pullback low. And so in that case, this means this one here is no longer a swing point. And let me continue running price. Okay, so we can clearly see exactly right there, price has taken out the recently formed valid pullback low exactly right here by a week. We can clearly see that. So this means that we have just confirmed our swing point high exactly right there, and we'll just be waiting for a break past this high to confirm the valid break of structure, as long as the retracement is deep enough, at least the 50% of the trading range. Okay, so I'll continue running price. And you can clearly see exactly right there, price retraces deeper, all the way mitigating something there, and you can clearly see price headed higher. Okay, so this means that we have just acquired our swing point low exactly right there, because that's the lowest point price achieved, and you can clearly see that this swing point low is still protected. So this means that a break past this swing point high is a valid break of structure, and in this case, this here is a valid break of structure. This one here was our recently formed valid pullback low that price took, and you can clearly see the reversal was after price has mitigated this order flow exactly right here. So don't worry about the POIs, we'll be getting there, but for now we are just marking the market structure. We can clearly see that this retracement is deep even by the use of the eye. So if I am to drag my fib all the way to that swing point high, we can clearly see that the retracement was deep enough, up to 50% of this trading range. So this means that this here is a valid pullback with no any doubt. Okay, so right now we have just acquired a new trading range exactly right there. And we can clearly see that the recently formed valid pullback low is exactly that one there. So let me continue running price. Okay, so price has taken out the recently formed valid pullback low. So this means that we have just acquired a swing point high. This one here, okay, so let me just use. Okay, so right now we are just waiting for price to reverse back and break past this swing point high to confirm a bullish break of structure. Okay, so exactly right there you can see the retracement is deep. Very good, exactly right there. And we have just confirmed another valid break of structure. So exactly right here, this one here is a valid break of structure, and we can clearly see that this here is the lowest swing point achieved by that retracement. So this one here is the swing point low, and we can clearly see even by the use of the eyes that this retracement was very deep. We can clearly see it was past the 50% of our trading range. So this means that this one here is a very strong break of structure. Okay, so we are in a new trading range, and you can clearly see, guys, that things are now easy. And we can clearly see that this one here is our recently formed valid pullback low. So let me continue running price. Okay, so exactly right there, we can clearly see that price has taken out this recently formed valid pullback low. So this confirms a swing point high exactly right there. And you can clearly see the retracement is deep even by the use of the eyes. Let's measure the retracement and see. We can clearly see the retracement is deeper enough to confirm that if price now reverses and breaks past that, that will be a valid break of structure. Okay, so let me continue running price and see what price does. Okay, so exactly right there, you can see price is reversing. All right, so eventually you can clearly see that price made that break of structure exactly right there. Okay, so we can clearly see the break of structure, and this one here is our swing point low. We can clearly see that it is the lowest point this retracement achieved. We can clearly see that this previous swing point low is still protected. So this means that this one here is a valid bullish break of structure. So exactly right there. So you can clearly see, guys, this thing is very easy. And yeah, by the way, you can clearly see that we are printing consecutive break of structures. So these consecutive bullish break of structures indicate that the market is uptrending, that we are in an uptrend. Price is printing higher highs and higher lows. You can clearly see this here is a higher high, this one here is a higher low. This one here is a higher high. This one here is a higher low. So these printing of the higher highs and the higher lows and the consecutive bullish boss events are the things that indicate that we are uptrending or the market is bullish. Okay, so we can clearly see exactly right here. This here is our new trading range. Of course, ranging from this low all the way to that high currently. So we know the next step, usually marking the recently formed valid pullback. And I can clearly see that the recently formed valid pullback is exactly right there. So let me continue running price. Alright, so exactly right here, we can clearly see that price made another pullback. And so the pullback low was exactly right there. And we can clearly see that the pullback low is already taken, but that retracement is not convincing enough to confirm a break of structure. So let me just continue running price. Yeah, you can clearly see price took this low, made a break past that high. We said in this case, since this retracement is very small, that lowest point that retracement achieved becomes the new recently formed valid pullback low. Again, we can clearly see that price created another valid pullback, so we shift because that's the recent. So let me continue running price. You can clearly see that price created another one exactly right here. So if I zoom so that you guys can clearly see, you can clearly see that this one is a valid pullback. So exactly right there, that's the recently formed valid pullback low. So right now we have just confirmed a swing point high. So you can clearly see that's our higher high exactly right there. And right now I'm just waiting for price to reverse back and break past this swing point high to confirm a bullish break of structure. Okay, so you can clearly see price is retracing. In fact, it retraced very deep, and we can clearly see that price retraced very deep. This low is still protected exactly right there. So this is where price is currently, but right now we can clearly see that price has mitigated this rejection block, and probably price will be reversing back all the way towards breaking past this swing point high, confirming that break of structure and continuing with the prevailing trend, of which it is the uptrend. Alright guys, so enough with the bullish market structure mapping. Let's get to the bearish part. Okay, so just like we identified earlier, this one here was the recently formed valid pullback, and price has taken that out, and you can clearly see price reversed and made a break past that swing point low prior to the retracement, so that creates a valid bearish break of structure. So if I am to mark the swing points, we can clearly see that was the swing point low, and you can clearly see that the highest point price achieved was exactly that one. So that creates now the swing point high, and this means that we have just created our trading range, of course ranging from that high all the way to this low. If I am to mark the recently formed valid pullback, I can clearly see it was created before the break of structure, and that it is. So right now let me continue running price. Okay, so exactly right here can clearly see price created another valid pullback below here, and since that was the recent, then we shift focus to it, and we can clearly see price has already taken that out. So this means that we have just confirmed a swing point low exactly right there, and right now I'm just waiting for price to reverse back and break past our swing point low exactly right there to confirm that bearish break of structure. Okay, so let me continue running price, and you can clearly see exactly right there, after price has mitigated that decisional order flow, price reversed back and made a break past this swing point low, and that confirms a bearish break of structure. We can actually measure the length of the retracement starting from that high all the way to this low. We can clearly see that the retracement made it to the 50% of that dealing range. So this means it is deep enough to confirm that bearish break of structure. So this means that this one here is our valid break of structure to the downside, that is a bearish break of structure. That one was the recently formed valid pullback high. Okay, so now we have our new swing point high. So exactly right there. So exactly right there we have our new trading range again. And currently, I can clearly see the recently formed valid pullback high is that one created before the break of structure. Okay, so let me continue running price. Price created another valid pullback below there. So we shift focus to the recently formed valid pullback. Okay, so let me continue running price, and you can clearly see that our recently formed valid pullback high is taken out exactly right there. So this confirms a swing point low exactly right there. So right now I'm just waiting for price to reverse back and make a break past this low to confirm that bearish break of structure. Okay, so exactly right there, you can clearly see the retracement was deep, very, very deep. And then after that, you can clearly see price is heading lower, and eventually it achieved to this low, or it eventually made a break past this swing point low. And that's what we call a bearish break of structure. And we can clearly see our swing point high is still protected, and our new swing point high is this one here, exactly right there. And so this means we are in a new trading range, of course ranging from that high all the way to this low. And so the next step, marking the recently formed valid pullback high, and we can clearly see where it is exactly right there before the break of structure. So let me continue running price, and you can clearly see price took that out by just a week. It was a tap and go. By the way, we can clearly see that this retracement was deep enough. There was no need for me actually to measure this. We can clearly see the retracement was past the 50% of the trading range. So with no doubt, just by the use of the eyes, we can fully confirm that as a strong bearish break of structure. So exactly right here. Now, if I am to zoom, we can clearly see that price took this recently formed valid pullback exactly right there, guys. You can clearly see exactly right there. So price took that, and we say that it can be by a week or a body closure. In this case, it was by a week, And so this means that we can confirm this one here is a swing point. So this one is a swing point low, and of course this one here is a swing point high. But first, I need to make sure that this retracement was deep enough past the 50% of our trading range. So exactly right here, if I am to drag, you can clearly see that this retracement, you can clearly see there is barely to the 50% of our trading range. So this means that this one here is not a valid bearish break of structure. And so in that case, let me delete these swing points. And of course, this here, this highest point achieved by that retracement becomes our new valid pullback high. And that's where now we are waiting for price to take out before we can actually confirm this one here is a swing point. Okay, so let me run price. And we can clearly see exactly right there, price has taken out that high. So this means now I can confirm this one here to be a swing point low. And if price breaks past that, then it will be a bearish valid break of structure. So exactly right here, you can clearly see price made that break. By the way, a break by a week is also valid. So yeah, so that's a valid break of structure exactly right there. Yeah, that's a valid boss. This one here was the recently formed valid pullback high. And if I am to measure this retracement, I'm sure it made it to the 50% of this trading range. And you can clearly see exactly right here that this retracement was deep enough, made it to the 50% of our retracement. So this means that that is a strong break of structure, and we can confirm that this one here is a swing point high. So exactly right there, that becomes a swing point high. And yeah, so now we are currently in a new trading range. So exactly right there, we are currently in a new trading range. And by the way, these consecutive bearish break of structures, you can clearly see these consecutive bearish break of structure indicate that the market is in a bearish bias, or we are actually downtrending. The market is in a downtrend. We can clearly see price is making the lower lows and the lower highs. You can clearly see a lower low, a lower high, again here, a lower low, a lower high. So this is what we call a downtrend, where price is creating lower lows and lower highs. As long as price does not break past these protected swing point highs, we are still in a downtrend. Okay, so back to our trading range. You can clearly see exactly right there. And we can see our recently formed valid pullback. It's not this one. It's actually that one there, created before the break of structure. So, yep. Yeah, the reason is why I'm saying this one is not a valid pullback. We can clearly see that this bullish candle is an insider bar. So just like I said earlier, if you don't know how to identify valid pullbacks, I would really recommend you to watch the previous part before we proceed with this one. Otherwise, we can clearly see where our valid pullback high is. So we are just waiting for the takeout before we confirm that that swing point. Okay, so price created another recently formed valid pullback down below here. So this means that we shift to the high, and that becomes our recently formed valid pullback high. So if I am to continue running price, you can clearly see price has taken out that recently formed valid pullback. So this means that we have just confirmed a swing point low exactly right here. And so if price reverses back and breaks past this swing point low, we have just confirmed a bearish break of structure. We can clearly see the retracement is already deep, probably past the 50% of our trading range. So if I am to measure this, we can clearly see the retracement is already past the 50% of our dealing range. So this means that if price now reverses and breaks past this one here, this will be a valid break of structure. Okay, so let me continue running price. And you can clearly see exactly right there, after price has taken out this core liquidity level right here. So don't worry about what I'm saying, guys. You'll get to learn all of this in due time. So after price has taken out that, you can clearly see that reversal. And all right, so price has yet taken out this low. So let me extend this. Yeah, you can clearly see price has yet made it out, or price has yet broken past that. So let me continue running price, and exactly right there you can clearly see the break. It was actually a break by a week. We can clearly see exactly right here. If I zoom, guys, you can clearly see this here was a break, and it was a break by a week. And I say that a break by a week is a valid break of structure. So this means that we are in a new trading range, and we have just acquired our new higher high exactly right there. And if I am to mark the recently formed valid pullback, I can clearly see the high is exactly right there. So, yep, exactly right there. The reason as to why I'm not picking this one here is because this here is a minor one inside the major. You can clearly see where the pullback started. It started here, and you can clearly see the break exactly right there. So this means that this one here is the right pullback high and not that one. Okay, so let me continue running price. You can clearly see price has taken out that high. So if now price reverses and makes a break past our swing point low, exactly right there, that will be a bearish break of structure. As long as this retracement is deep enough. If I am to measure this retracement, of course, starting from that high all the way to this low, we can clearly see the retracement has made it to the 0.5% or the 50% of that dealing range. So this means that if price now makes a break past this low, then that will be a confirmed bearish break of structure. Okay, so now let me continue running price. Okay, so price is consolidating in between our dealing range. You can clearly see that. But then eventually we can clearly see the opposite happened. Instead of actually price breaking past our swing point, we can clearly see that price made a break past this high, exactly right there. And this is what we call now a change of character, because price has just made a break past the protected swing point high, and that's what we call a change of character, and that's the early sign that price has shifted bias. It's actually not the early sign, but it's actually a bias shift. Yeah, price has just made a bias shift from, you can clearly see that this one here was a downtrend, and now price has made a break past our swing point high, our protected swing point high, and this means that price has just made what we call a change of character. So that's a coach, right? So let me use the small letters. Yeah, that's a change of character. And yeah, we have now shifted to now being bullish. Okay, so exactly right there, we can clearly see that price has created that valid pullback. Exactly right there, we can clearly see the recently formed valid pullback is that one. And so if I'm to continue running price, you can clearly see price has already taken that out, confirming this one here as our swing point high. So that's our higher high exactly right there. If I am to measure the length of the retracement, we can clearly see the retracement is very deep. Price has mitigated this, what we call the order flow. You can clearly see that this is the extreme order flow, and you can clearly see price has mitigated that. So probably the reversal will be happening from there, and you can clearly see price is now reversing back. You can clearly see, and price, okay, so price is still in our range, but then eventually price made a break past that high. So exactly right there, we can clearly see the retracement was deep exactly here. You can clearly see 50% retracement. So this means that this one here is a valid break of structure. So let me use this one here. Yep, so that's a valid break of structure. So exactly right there, that's a valid break of structure. You can clearly see price has taken out the recently formed valid pullback low and mitigated this extreme order flow, and then after that price made that reversal, and this retracement was deep enough to confirm a strong break of structure, because this retracement made it to the 50% of this trading range. You can clearly see exactly right there. So this means that we have just acquired ourselves our swing point low exactly right there. And so that's a higher high, that's a higher low, and you can clearly see we are continuing with the uptrend. So guys, I will end the video here. I don't want to make the video long. And so if you've learned something, do me a favor, drop a like, and yeah,